establishing the Latin kingdom in Palestine, established a Latin kingdom in Constantinople, much to the chagrin of the Greeks. They were not pleased with this, and they're still not pleased with this. They never after about 60 years, they threw the Latins out. But they never regrouped and reclaimed all their lands. When they took over Constantinople, another prince popped up, down in the Greek Isles, and another one over here, and another. So it was just a collection of small little kingdoms after that. And yet they continued on trying to persevere instead of a great power, military power, now being more of a merchant, something akin to Venice, a merchant power, but heavily reduced in the number of people, the wealth that passed through there, and just a shadow of what they were before in terms of strength and numbers and wealth. And to make matters worse, the intrigue within the palace over who was going to be emperor didn't diminish with that. And some of these claimants who wanted to be the emperor of Byzantium actually invited the Turks over into Europe to help them win the war. And the Turks didn't want to go home, so they started rapidly taking over more and more land, and the Byzantine Empire had no ability to stop them. By 1400, the Byzantine Empire was little more than the city of Constantinople, Thessalonica, so St. Paul's lesson to the Thessalonians. And as you see on this map here, kind of the purple areas, that was all that was left of the Byzantine Empire by 1430. This is the map after Thessalonica had been taken. So very little left, just around the city where the 2 points come together, and then that island off of Greece there. And that is about it. And the Turks had already tried to besiege Constantinople and just take over everything 3 times by this point, in 1402, 1411, and 1422. But then succession dynastic problems arose. Someone died off. Who's the next sultan? Distracted them for a while, and this is the opportunity John VIII used to go to the west to try to, one last time, get someone to come to their aid. And as he came, he had already traveled to Hungary and Venice in the 1420s seeking help, but because the West saw them as schismatics, right? They are not in communion with us, arm's length, we're not really going to help them. We want them into full communion before we'll help them. And so he realized that if Constantinople is going to get any assistance, any help, there has to be reunion. So kind of, again, a rock and a hard place is where he finds himself. This place in Switzerland, the Greeks considered backwater, Hicksville. We don't want to be bothered by going up there. Well, we don't know how do we get there to begin with. There's no access from the sea. They ask for a place. They like a place more accessible from the Greeks. Something along the Adriatic maybe, or accessible by sea. And the council at Basel was adamant that they were not moving. It was going to be here, or maybe at Avignon, and that. The French were very prevalent in Basel, and so Avignon papacy, on all those nightmares from the past of being controlled by the French, that was a no-go. And so this is what Basil IV used as a pretext to take the council and everything else back. On September 18th, 1437, he called the Council of Basel to a close. He said, you have 31 days, 1 month to wrap up whatever business you're doing here, then we're moving to a new location. And he picked the Italian city of Ferrara, which would be much more accessible to the Greeks. And he agreed that, even though, you think about it here, he's nearly bankrupt himself because of what the council has done to him, or he is bankrupt, and he offers to pay for the emperor, his entourage, the patriarch of Constantinople, a number of bishops. Ultimately 700 Greeks show up for this, and he has agreed to pay for their stay for this whole time. And so the Greeks come, and most of the delegates in Basel think that they have the authority, and they are not moving. And so this opens a new schism in the church, but one that quickly gets out. It doesn't last long. It doesn't have as many long-lasting effects. The council in Basel, Switzerland, will officially continue on until 1449. So at this point, another 12 years. But after the council moves to Ferrara and then Florence, most of the bishops, and then within a year, most of the princes shift their attention and their allegiance to Florence, and this whole conciliarism debate reaches its end. The Greeks arrived in Ferrara on March 4th, 1443. So for 1 year, the council was in this city of Ferrara. And its opening session opened with an excommunication of all those who refused to leave Basel, who thought that they were continuing on and representing the church there. So a new little schism developing. This council in Ferrara saw itself as, or its goal is reestablishing communion with the separated Christians with the East, beginning with the Greeks. And I said, that the Greeks had arrived by March 4th. So on April 9th, there was this reopening of the council. That opening in union with the Patriarch of Constantinople, who was in the city, but in his 80s and rather ill, so he was represented by someone else. The Archbishop of Nicaea was there. Bessarion was his name. Mark of Ephesus, who was a Patriarch of Ephesus, was there, and he was not too keen on this whole reunion thing, but he was there, he came along, and a few others. And one of the things that Emperor John VIII insisted on is that, because what does he want? He wants help to come and bail him out. There are some ships to send in there, something, so they're not overrun and murdered. And he said, well, we really want the other Christian princes to be present for this. So why don't we hold off doing anything until they show up? And so Pope Eugenius IV agrees, and for 7 months they suspend formal sessions. They continue to have theological talks, debating about the theological issues that were most controversial. So the biggest one at that time was the Latin, in the way we have prayed the Nicene Creed in the church since the 800s, with the use of "and the Son." The Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father, and we say "and the Son." And in Latin, it's filioque, and it becomes known as the filioque controversy, because this was not mentioned in Nicaea, where if you look at the Council of Nicaea, 325, says almost very, very little about the Holy Spirit. And then where all those other things about the Holy Spirit are added, the First Council of Constantinople. And then when you get to Ephesus and Chalcedon, they are very adamant that these are not to be tampered with, right? The creed is not to be tampered with. And so the Greeks think adding anything to the creed is just not to be done. You're in violation of the councils if you do that. And in the West, that phrase was added in response to, initially in Spain in the 500s, because the Arians, recall the Arians, they did not believe in the full divinity of Christ. And one way to stress the full divinity of Christ was to show that everything that the Father has is mine, and mine is the Father's, right? And if from the Father the Holy Spirit proceeds, then that procession from the Son must also be true. That's the Western thought and a way of responding to that heresy, a way of teaching in the creed. But the Greeks were never liked the way that it was added, and they were suspicious of what it meant. So that is the big theological issue. Otherwise,